The federal courtroom, typically a place of solemn order and measured debate, was suddenly transformed into a stage for high drama. On this day, the eyes of the nation were fixed on a single room, as former President Donald Trump, never one to shy away from controversy, stood and pointedly accused a top Democratic leader seated in the gallery. The air was thick with tension, every word echoing off the marble walls, as the country's political divisions were laid bare for all to see. The judge's gavel thundered through the chaos, demanding order, but the courtroom was already in uproar. Reporters rushed to capture every detail, their phones and cameras raised, as the hearing instantly became the focal point of national attention. The scene was electric. Every gesture, every whispered conversation was scrutinized and broadcast to millions. This wasn't just another legal proceeding, it was a raw, unfiltered display of America's deep political rifts, playing out in real time. Outside, crowds gathered, some chanting in support of Trump, others demanding accountability. Inside, the debate was just as fierce, with lawyers and politicians trading barbs, their voices rising above the din. Trump's outburst was no accident. It was a calculated move, designed to energize his loyal base and paint his political opponents as obstacles to his vision for the country. His words reverberated far beyond the courtroom, fueling passionate reactions on both sides of the political spectrum. The confrontation in that courtroom was more than just a personal clash. It symbolized the deep animosity and high-stakes power struggles now dominating American politics. Every look, every word, seemed to carry the weight of history, as if the future of the nation was being decided in that very moment. News networks interrupted regular programming to cover the unfolding drama, while social media platforms exploded with commentary, memes, and heated debates. Across the country, Americans tuned in, some anxiously, others with hope or outrage, as the lines between law and politics blurred before their eyes. For Trump's supporters, this was a bold stand against what they saw as entrenched corruption and political persecution. For his critics, it was a dangerous attack on the very foundations of the rule of law. The nation was split, each side convinced of its own truth, each rallying behind its chosen leaders. The chaos that erupted in that federal courtroom was more than a momentary disruption. It was a signal that America had entered a new, volatile chapter in its political history. As the dust settled, one thing was clear: the nation was watching, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The uproar began when former President Donald Trump unveiled a controversial plan to redirect billions of dollars in federal education grants away from the Department of Education. This move, which caught many by surprise, was framed by the Trump administration as a bold step toward reforming how the federal government supports education across the country. The plan would have shifted significant resources and decision-making power from the Department of Education, a cabinet-level agency responsible for national education policy, to another federal department. Specifically, Trump wanted to transfer these funds to the Department of Labor, arguing that this shift would better align educational programs with workforce development and job training initiatives. The administration claimed that by consolidating these efforts under the Department of Labor, the government could more efficiently prepare students and workers for the demands of a changing economy. However, this proposal faced immediate and fierce opposition. The Democratic leader at the center of the legal battle, a prominent figure in Congress known for championing public education, quickly emerged as the face of resistance. This leader organized press conferences, rallied support from educators and parents, and led the charge in both Congress and the courts to block Trump's plan. Their vocal opposition and leadership made them Trump's prime target, both in legal filings and in the court of public opinion. For Trump and his supporters, the proposed transfer was about more than just moving money. They argued it was a necessary step to cut government bureaucracy, eliminate waste, and ensure that federal dollars were being used to help Americans find good jobs. Trump frequently spoke about the need to modernize government and make it more responsive to the needs of workers and businesses, often citing this plan as a key example of his approach. On the other side, Democrats and education advocates saw the move as a direct attack on federal oversight of education, a long-standing conservative goal. They argued that shifting control to the Department of Labor would undermine public education, reduce accountability, and prioritize job training over a well-rounded education. Protests erupted outside federal buildings, with demonstrators holding signs demanding the protection of education funding and oversight. When Congress ultimately blocked the transfer, Democrats didn't stop there. They turned to the courts, filing lawsuits that argued Trump had overstepped his executive authority by attempting to bypass legislative approval. The legal battle quickly became a high-profile case, drawing national media attention and further polarizing the debate over federal education policy. The court's decision to issue an injunction against the transfer infuriated Trump. He lashed out publicly, criticizing the judge's ruling and accusing his opponents of sabotaging his efforts to reform government. This legal setback only fueled Trump's determination to make an example of the Democratic leader who had spearheaded the opposition. By singling out this Democratic leader, Trump personified the opposition, turning a complex policy dispute into a personal battle. He framed the fight as a struggle between his vision for a more efficient government and what he called the deep state forces determined to block change. This narrative cast the Democratic leader as the embodiment of everything Trump's base opposed. This tactic proved effective in mobilizing Trump's supporters. By simplifying the issue and focusing on a single opponent, he energized his base, turning a complicated policy debate into a rallying cry for his movement. Supporters at rallies cheered as Trump denounced the Democratic leader, seeing the fight as part of a larger battle over the direction of the country. In the end, the Democratic leader became the public face of what Trump labeled deep state obstruction. Their high-profile role in the legal battle ensured that the fight over education policy became a defining moment in the broader struggle between Trump and his political opponents, with both sides using the controversy to rally their supporters and shape the national conversation. Republicans see the courtroom drama as proof that the judiciary and Congress are blocking a president's mandate to reform government. They argue Trump's plan to move education grants is common sense, and opposition is pure partisanship. Many conservatives believe judges have become political, using their power to halt policies they dislike. This frustration has sparked calls to limit judicial power and restore executive authority. For Trump's supporters, the confrontation is a justified response to a system designed to thwart change. It's a fight, they say, for a president's ability to govern and deliver on promises. Democrats see the situation as a direct assault on democracy, not a quest for efficiency. They argue Trump's attempt to reorganize agencies without Congress is a dangerous power grab. The courts, in their view, are fulfilling their duty by checking executive overreach. Judicial injunctions are seen as safeguards, not obstacles. Trump's attacks on judges and opponents are viewed as efforts to intimidate and undermine accountability. For Democrats, resisting the transfer is about defending the Constitution and the rule of law. Their stand is a message: no president is above the law. The fight over education grants is part of a broader conservative effort to shrink the Department of Education. Moving grants to the Labor Department reframes education as job training, not holistic development. Democrats argue this narrow focus undermines the broader mission of schools. Billions in funding and millions of students are caught in the crossfire, with schools facing confusion and uncertainty. Critics warn the move would create chaos and harm students for political gain. The battle is a proxy for competing visions: market-driven skills versus comprehensive education. The outcome will shape American education for years to come. The judiciary is now the main battleground for America's political wars. One side sees judges as defenders of democracy, the other as activists blocking the people's will. Nationwide injunctions have fueled calls on the right to rein in the courts. Trump's personal attacks on judges have shattered norms of judicial respect. Every court decision is now viewed through a partisan lens, eroding trust in the judiciary. The education grants case is a prime example. A political fight disguised as a legal one. The court's ability to act as neutral arbiters is under threat. The courtroom drama is just one front in a much deeper and ongoing constitutional struggle between the branches of the United States government. While the public often sees the legal battles play out in high-profile courtrooms, the real contest for power and authority is happening behind the scenes, shaping the very foundation of American democracy. This tug-of-war is not just about individual cases, but about the balance of power that has defined the nation since its founding. The executive branch, led by the president, constantly pushes the boundaries of its authority, seeking to expand its influence through executive actions and policy decisions. Meanwhile, Congress, representing the legislative branch, fights to assert its oversight powers, holding hearings, issuing subpoenas, and demanding accountability. The judiciary, with the Supreme Court at its apex, is often caught in the middle, tasked with interpreting the Constitution and resolving disputes between the other two branches. Each branch wields its own unique set of tools in this ongoing contest: executive orders and vetoes from the president, investigations and legislation from Congress, and judicial review from the courts. These mechanisms are designed to provide leverage, but they can also escalate tensions, especially when the branches disagree on the limits of their power. The system of checks and balances, a cornerstone of the American political system, is frequently put to the test. When the branches are unable to cooperate or compromise, the result is often gridlock. Important legislation stalls, government functions slow down, and the public grows frustrated with the lack of progress. At the heart of this struggle lies a fundamental question. Should the president have broad, almost unchecked authority to act in the nation's interest, or should power be carefully shared and checked by Congress and the courts? This debate is not just theoretical. It shapes real policies and affects the lives of millions of Americans. The consequences of this constitutional tug-of-war are far-reaching. When the branches clash, it can undermine government stability and erode public trust in democratic institutions. Citizens watch these battles unfold on the news, participate in protests, and voice their concerns about whether their leaders are truly serving the public good. The recent clash between former President Donald Trump and Democratic leaders is a vivid, real-world example of how policy disputes can quickly escalate into constitutional crises. These high-stakes confrontations test the resilience of the system and force the nation to confront difficult questions about the limits of power and the rule of law. As these battles continue, the nation is left to wonder: can the American system of government still resolve its deepest differences peacefully, or are we entering a new era of perpetual conflict between the branches? The answer will shape the future of American democracy for generations to come. These power struggles have real consequences for ordinary people. The education grant fight could disrupt programs for students nationwide, creating confusion and delays. When government is paralyzed by conflict, services suffer, from Social Security to disaster response. The constant battles erode trust in institutions, making people feel the system is rigged. A healthy democracy depends on faith in fair courts and effective government. These fights raise fundamental questions. Is the president above the law? Are courts truly independent? The answers will shape the country's future. The courtroom showdown is a reminder that democracy's health depends on everyone's engagement. The Trump Democratic leader confrontation is a stark measure of American democracy's stress. It reflects deep divisions, a breakdown in civil discourse, and a system under immense pressure. The separation of powers is now the main battleground, with each branch pushing its limits. If leaders stop respecting the courts or Congress, checks and balances could collapse. The nation faces a choice: recommit to compromise and the rule of law, or continue down a path of escalating conflict. The stakes are high, whether the U.S. remains governed by laws or by powerful individuals. The chaos in that courtroom is a warning. The future depends on rebuilding trust and finding common ground.